Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I really like to take this time and thank my guests because I know, to me at least, I know that I deem two things that they're coming with very important and very precious, and I want to acknowledge it to them. First is their time. Doc, I thank you for coming with your time because that commodity is a precious thing, and you are willing to spend some of that with us. The second is your journey. And again, I know how precious and powerful that is because it houses a couple of things, houses defeat, houses pain, struggle, victory, all of it, wisdom, everything houses within your journey. And we want to thank you for coming to share it with us so that we can gain some insight, become better human spirits while we occupy this beautiful little space called Earth. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. I want you to tell the people, Doc, all the things that you have created with your books and all the other things that you have given birth to, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So I just finished writing a book. It actually launches tomorrow. So it's on Amazon and it's titled Overcommitted. The whole purpose around that book is to get out to people ways that you can eliminate overcommitment in your life. And the one reason why I wrote it is primarily because I'm somebody who definitely has spent a fair amount of time being overcommitted previously. And then, I found some tools that have just really successfully helped me. And so with that, I created the Overcommitment book. In addition to that, there's a 5-day cleanse, or DARE is what I call it. And the DARE is an acronym that's in the book as well that we can talk about if you'd like. And it's just we sort of deconstruct what overcommitments people might have in their lives, and then we kind of walk those back. In addition to that, I'm a consultant in life sciences. I primarily focus in on companies that are small to medium-sized companies. That's kind of my day-to-day business life. I've spent a lot of time in corporate life as well. I spent 18 years at General Electric, nearly 4 years, I believe, at Becton Dickinson as well. I've worked for Roche, and then just small companies since then, mainly focusing in on, how to help them reduce complexity and increase their performance. So that's kind of where I, in a business life, focus. Yeah. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that the thing that put me more or less on this life sciences path that I'm on is that whenever I was 8 years old, I lost my mother to ovarian cancer. And so that's kind of what, in my mind, where I always wanted to wind up was, I wanted to be a doctor, but at the same time, as I got closer and closer to that profession, I figured out that I can't watch the pain and suffering so close. It's just not something I can personally do. So I have to be a couple of steps removed, but still want to be very close to the people that are having a definite impact every day.
Yeah, that's a powerful place to be, healthcare, and so close as a physician to see the trauma on a daily basis to the human spirit and the cost of it. Those folks there, man, are some special human beings. And
yes,
I was in the business aspect of healthcare. I love healthcare, but I couldn't handle that stuff. So I always tip my hand with all respect to nurses, physicians, and all of those that deal on a daily basis with the trauma. You had mentioned, Doc, that it was an incident happened at the age of 8. I want to take you back a little beyond that. Let's go to your family life. How was your family life as a child, as you remember that a little before your mom passed? And then we'll deal with the passing of your mom as to how it shaped you as a little young boy. Talk to us about your family.
Yeah, sure. So my dad worked for U.S. Steel. My mom worked for, I think it was the Ansco windshield wiper company. So they made windshield wipers. I grew up in Northwest Indiana. it was a booming time for the steel industry. I mean, I remember not really understanding like economic kind of disparities because as I grew up, I mean, I thought everybody, they went to church on Sunday, went out after church, to a meal at a restaurant, and that they, frequently, would go out to dinner, with their family. So we spent a lot of time, as I remember as a kid, doing that. I have two older sisters who both had left the house. So I was a latchkey kid. For anybody that doesn't know what that means, essentially, I grew up with a piece of string around my neck whenever I was a kid. And then whenever school ended at the end of the day, I would come home and, normally let myself in. I can remember doing that all the way back to, I must have been 5 years old. So I must have been pretty young. When winters came, so again, this is Northwest Indiana. When winters came, my mom would frequently drop me off at the local ski hill. And that was my babysitter, was one of the things I remember as well. And so, we were a great family. And then I can distinctly remember spending an awful lot of time in the doctor's office, probably from the time that I was probably like 5 or 6 until, until she passed whenever I was 8. So, an awful lot of time, in there as well, kind of spending time there.
Did the family unit, meaning the head of the family, your mom and dad, did they walk you through as to what were some of those things, or did they just, as usual how parents do, they just let you there in the midst while they're dealing with this? Did they walk with you and make you aware of what was happening?
I can remember at times, them trying to take, the time and explain exactly what was happening. But again, I was so young, and to try and understand, I think was, pretty difficult. One of the things that I distinctly remember that, I think is a wrong statement was whenever my mom did pass, one of the things that was said to me was, you definitely don't understand this moment at this point in time. And oh no, I understood. Wow. I clearly understood that from that point in time, I wasn't going to have the physical body of my mother, any longer with me. Right. So I knew that moment.
How, with that information, that piece of data that was given to you that you wouldn't understand, how did you interpret that as a young person when you did say, I do understand, but how did you interpret it, and how did you, did it affect you in any way when you, as you said, I knew about it? How did it affect you?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, the way I sort of, so I guess two things, right? So growing up, really close to the church, definitely not in it, not a pastor's kid or, somebody that, sort of, I would say spent, an inordinate amount of time at church, but at the same time, very, very close to the church family. And I can distinctly remember in my mind that, yes, my mother passed, but at the same time, she's with me, no matter what. And I still believe that to this day. My dad passed 2 years ago. And similarly, I speak to him frequently, as well. And it's all through this idea that, hey, look, their body's gone, but they're still with you. And so that's the one way that I sort of, continue to interpret that. I don't really hang on to those moments of, people that say things incorrectly. I just sort of, say, what, I don't, that's not what I believe. I believe that I definitely understood exactly what, what death meant at that point in time. However, I also believe strongly that, they're still with you.
Yeah. Those, you can't see it, but, Doc is looking at me, and, I have beard. I just started growing this thing a couple of months ago. The first time I'm ever growing a beard. And I was in my place and I'm walking by my mirror and I stopped and I was looking dead at my father. I looked at him because
Oh, wow.
my dad had his beard and he was growing his stuff. And for the first time, I stopped and looked at him and I'm like, "Hey, Dad," and I remember initiating this conversation while I'm staring at myself because I look like just a copy of my father. And I stood and have a brief conversation with him because he did pass as well a few years ago. So I believe that they're always here and there to listen and walk with us because my parents were two of my best friends. So here you are, Doc. How the passing of your mom, how was your relationship with your dad? How did you guys hold it together being in that space with that energy which was gone? And how did you guys hold it together as a team?
Yeah, this will be a bit tough to share, but I'll make my way through. I think he really struggled. I think so. The thing I haven't said is, so my dad was married extremely young. I can't say how old he was the first time that he was married, but his first wife passed away. She had some sort of problem with her kidneys, and whatever this problem was so severe that by the time that they made it to the emergency room, she died of something being wrong with her kidneys, right? Which isn't something that we really see a lot of today. And so, I can't really relate to what exactly happened. So he lost one wife there. Then with my mom, it was wife number 2. So, now he's, they would have been like in their late 30s, early 40s, somewhere in there whenever he lost his second wife. And so my stepmom, who lives with me now, is 90 right now, and she was wife number 3. And at one point, he thought that he could lose her, and he just kept telling me, he's like, "I can't lose a third one. This is unbearable." But she outlived him, so it's a good symbol. Back to the question of how did he manage that? So I think one, he took it rough. And 2, he has a full-time kind of mid-manager job inside of U.S. Steel, and and a small child at the same time that he's trying to figure out, like, how do I get this kid off to school? How do I make sure that he doesn't misbehave? I was showing my wife the other day. I actually had a letter. People may not believe this if they know me today, but I had a letter that essentially said that I was expelled from school until my father brought me back to school again. But it's sort of that, rebellious phase of, just wanting to act out because of, everything that's going on in my life. But at the same time, I felt like he tried his best to make sure that, that one, that I was taken care of, but 2, that, sort of that there was going to be somebody in my life as well. It could be a mother figure as well. And so that's why he wound up, quickly, trying to sort through his emotions and get back, to whatever regular life that he could create, as well.
And as the onset of the conversation, you said at the age of 8 when your mom passed, based on that incident, was there that you made one of your first agreement was that you wanted to go into the science, to the medical aspect of it. Do you remember that conversation with yourself, that incident that made you make that agreement beyond the death? Do you remember what that situation was, where you were sitting, who said something to you that triggered something that you said, you know what, this is where I want to go?
The main thing that stays in my mind is that that cancer, the day that cancer took my mom was the day that it created an enemy in me. So that to me was kind of that inflection point. I can't remember the day, but I can remember
the feeling,
sort of points in time, like, there were times whenever I worked for the steel mill myself. There was a time whenever I worked for, smaller companies outside of healthcare. And the whole entire time, my mind was like, how do I get back into working in a hospital? How do I get closer to cancer patients? How do I, kind of plot this path that gets me to where I want to go? Right. So,
So when you were moving through high school and all of the things, and you mentioned the little rebellious piece and the letter that no one knows that you have right now. When you were going through this adjustment phase, because of course that's a traumatic situation that a young boy is going through, and both you and your dad have to make that adjustment. And as you said, you began to rebel there. What were some of those thoughts, if you will, that were circling around you as you were there within your rebellious state? It's just dealing, just finding a way to cope. What were some of those thoughts that were coming in and you were dancing with as a young man in high school, as you're moving through your life?
Yeah, really good question. For me, what was the things that I remember overall through my time in high school would be, so I was somebody that I learned the clarinet in like fourth grade. I remember my sister had a clarinet. She taught me how to play the clarinet whenever I was in fourth grade. I played it for the class, and then quickly thereafter, I was given, sheet music and, taught how to read music and things like that. And then sort of migrate into like fifth and sixth grade in the school that I was in. You were allowed to join band at that point in time. And that was a private Christian school, in Portage, Indiana. And then, as I get into high school, I mean, band was a big deal to me. I mean, it was, even though it was kind of that rebellious phase still of my life, it was a big deal. And between the band teacher as well as just the environment around me, I found myself sort of slowly achieving things that I didn't necessarily, I was in this phase still of not necessarily wanting to comply with, different things in school. But band to me was a huge outlet of non-compliance. I mean, for the most part, we got to experiment with music that we liked and enjoyed.
I did the same.
I felt like that was good. Yeah, right.
I did the same. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Pep band for me was like, it was all about, acting out, whenever the basketball team would play and things. So, I mean, all of those things for me were ways to sort of, just primarily like act out without like being a kid that could have been, doing other things, being in gangs and other things. Yeah. So, yeah.
Music was mine. I discovered, because I grew up in the church, and I remember I played bass, and I remember in high school when I discovered, if you will, secular music, as they would tell us in Bible, when I grew up in church, which was rock and roll. I love rock and roll. Now they call it old school rock, I guess, with Black Sabbath and all those boys and Hendrix and, BTO and all the other things. And we used to, Nugent and all those guys. And that's the stuff we used to play. And that was where I got, quote unquote, my rebellious energy was put into that, versus much more so, like you said, the gangs or got into any deep drugs or anything. It was poured into the music, and I loved it, man. It was a great outlet, if you will, for us bad boys, huh?
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that's younger, again, that's listening to this, I mean, I had a boom box. I remember at one point that had two tape players in it. I'd worn one tape player out. I used to wear out cassette tapes all the time. So, again, these are things that, the people of today don't have to deal with.
Yeah.
But, I can remember those times.
Yeah, my mom and dad used to make me playlists on those tapes, and I'd be playing them just like you all day long. praying to God that none of it gets caught and ripped. And then, you have to do your little, cut of, tape to put it together, all the fun things. So talk to me now, as when you're gravitating, moving through your rebellious stage, that's normal stuff that we do as we progress. And I know that you had made this internal decision about heading towards the science, the medical aspect of it. What did you do when you got into college? Where did you go? And how did that set up?
Yeah, college for me was an interesting journey. So I currently sit here with a PhD and an MBA, right? So I mean, I tell everybody that I took the longest route possible in my education, though, and there are lots of ways that you can sort of shortcut a lot of different things. If you want to go the PhD route, especially, you don't necessarily need an MBA to do that. You can go from a bachelor's to a PhD. So, there is a way to do that without the interim step in between. So I started out. So I'm in school. One of the things, and again, I'll go back to my rebellious phase, as well, because to me, one, rebelling against sort of the standard way to do things is what led me to the place that I am now. And it also, sort of reinforced this idea of being creative. And so, when my grandkids now, are growing up and you see some of that same element, I'm like, yeah, that kid may actually, really do something in his life, whenever he gets, everything oriented. Right. So, so anyway, for me, so I started out in high school, sort of in this place where I had plenty of credits to graduate pretty early from high school. And this idea of graduating early and going to college was not something that was discussed where we were in Northwest Indiana at all. I mean, I didn't know anybody that graduated early. Certainly I would have pushed my father for that had I have known, hey, get me the heck out of this high school early. Let me get to work. But what happened was, I went to the Gary Career Center, and focused on electronics. Whenever I was there were two monumental people that taught me electronics. The 2 years that I went there, and they were fabulous teachers, whenever I was there. And there was one particular guy, Mr. Smith, who essentially taught us how to think about a problem first and then take that problem and develop a solution. And so he's like, look, I mean, you can engineer your way through, this particular problem. And I think our final project in that class, at least my final project, was a radio that would connect to a telephone that would allow you to not necessarily have to be at home to use the telephone. So this whole idea of a cell phone was like something that, was the problem that I was trying to solve. And then I designed the circuits and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. But that education starting there, then a guy showed up at the Gary Career Center with a laser, shined that laser on the wall. And I remember looking at it just mystified with the fact that this thing could travel through the air and you wouldn't see, any part of the beam until it hit something on the other end. And one of my friends in electronics at the Gary Career Center, I told him, I said, that's where I want to go. I want to go, study, how do lasers, kind of, work and things like that. As I finished my education at Vincennes, there was a lot of talk about, going more the military or defense route. That's not where I wanted to go. I definitely wanted to be in, healthcare and focus in on, healthcare and the things that you could do with lasers in healthcare. And so I left and actually, struggled for a while trying to find a job, in healthcare, wound up with, an industrial laser company, from there. And then shortly thereafter, wind up at Grant Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. That was my first medical job. At Grant Medical Center, whenever I was there, I was talking to one of the lead physicians that was researching cancer there, Dr. McCon. And as we were talking, he said, one of the things that you're going to figure out in life is that you will forever be judged, no matter how brilliant you are, by the piece of paper that hangs on the wall.
Yeah.
He said, so I would highly encourage you to think about going back to school, because he and I were having a conversation about the fact that I just, look, I mean, I went to high school. I went my 4 years. I got an associate's degree in laser physics, and I'm done. I think that's it for me. I don't want to do anything else. And he's just trying to encourage me and just say, hey, look, it's a good, sort of place to be as a young guy. But at the same time, you probably want to think about, your future. And so that's what set me on this path of, then I got a bachelor's degree in business. I followed up with an MBA, master's in business administration. And then after that, so in my journey of going through all this education, I actually found out that I really enjoy teaching, and I enjoy breaking things down and being able to tell people, this is how you might think about solving a particular problem, and then seeing them actually implement it, gives me a lot of energy as well. Yeah. And so with that, I was like, you know what, a PhD would be a perfect thing, because then you could, strongly author books. You could, teach people in a classroom. You could teach people lots of ways. And so, that's what put me on my path for my education. Long story, but yeah.
Yeah, I love it though, because you are laying out all the things that is very important in personal growth. There's a statement there. I always tell people, find your statement of faith. And listening to yours, you had your statement of faith. You collect data from people. It could come from a conversation like you did with that doctor. It could come from seeing that laser on the wall and looking at that. It could come from the death of your mother. But those statements of faith began to guide you. And I tell people, why do I call it that? It is because you believe it. And you believe it so much so that you will take the necessary corresponding action to bring that to pass. And I believe that people are circling, Doc, because they haven't located that piece of information, that data that will cause them to make that statement that will then guide their life. And you were talking about it all through your story as you mentioned it, and how from one space into the other, you made it and kept making it and kept guiding your life. And and I tell people that growth, personal growth in any shape or form that comes, it's never a linear journey. It cannot be. Right. It would be boring, wouldn't it? If it was a linear journey, there would be no flavor there. And so the fact that there is this movement that is up, back, sideways, all over the place, and look at you now as a matter of all of that accumulation of data, you are now using all of it to facilitate the development of human spirits as they come into your space. You're using the book, the teaching, all of those things that you saw and helped you make decisions to guide you to that next phase. And I tell people, find that statement quickly. And it comes, I don't know how you're going to, but it happens, as I mentioned to you in your story, several of them, a laser being put on a wall. And you wanted to know what happened from the time that laser left that small unit, what took place in the air before it hits that wall, and getting this other data from this doctor. So here you are, Doc. You've accumulated all of these, as I've mentioned. I want you to talk about you in the midst of all of that. So here you are, you're gaining all of these things. But I want to get in a little more and talk to Doc Davis about how was this man in the midst of all of that? How was he doing? Because I know you mentioned briefly you struggled and stuff like that. What was happening to him as far as how was he interpreting the world and people in the world around him? Talk to us about some of those things, Doc.
Yeah. So through my college life, so let me maybe start with my associate's degree. So, as I said, where I grew up, there was this disparity that I was oblivious to be
Mm-hmm.
frank about it. Right. I mean, there's a definite economic disparity from where I was. I mean, with my mom's passing and things like that, my dad had said, look, you need to go to college. We're prepared for you to go to college and things like that. And he really wanted me to get the heck out of the steel industry. He was afraid that, that's where I would wind up. And it was funny because, before going to college, so in I would assume it was my summer break, prior to heading off to college, I had gotten a job at the steel mill that he was at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a very hard worker. I mean, I'd show up and just work myself, really hard while I was there. One, to prove to myself that I could do it, but then, just to make sure that people understood, that I personally would, work extremely hard. That this wasn't something that my dad did for me or anything like that. It's something that I had to interview for and all of that kind of stuff. And I just happened to wind up where he was. And I was one of the lowest paid guys that was there.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one particular job where you were supposed to get double your rate. And then I got my paycheck and it was at the same exact rate. Well, it's because my dad went to the person who essentially was working on the pay at that point in time and said, you will not pay him double the rate. I mean, I know that's what he's supposed to get, but you will not do it because if he starts to see all this money coming in, he's not leaving here. And he's probably right. I mean, at that point in time. So anyway, I go off to college and my wife now, went to a college that was about, I would guess it's like an hour north of where I went to school. And so, weekends we would, get together and things like that. And after about, I would think it was probably at the end of year one, her family couldn't afford sending her back. There was just no way, even with, Pell Grants and other stuff, there's just no way that she could continue. And, she stops going to school and, went, to work back kind of, where we grew up. And, so I finished school. We get married right as I finished my associate's degree. So, I go to school for 2 years, towards the end of that, we get married. And then right behind that is whenever we had my son. So, as I started in the workforce, I mean, we had a family starting. And then we had twins shortly after that. So as I started in this hospital in in Columbus, Ohio at Grant Medical Center, we had all three of my kids at that point in time. And, I mean, my education and everything else and the rebellion is more set on how the heck am I going to fight for my family and get what I can to, to support them. Right. So that was sort of the focus at that point.
I got you, because life, as they say, began to, I remember this guru would say, let life disturb your comfort. And it took a little while for me to get it, but sure understood what was said. So here you are, life is coming along with you on this journey, and the kids are there. And I know how the family unit and the responsibility that comes and how it causes the male to make decisions to support and be that support system for the family to carry them. And as you're growing in your family, you're married and all of these things. Again, how emotionally I'm looking at the way your perception beyond all of the surrounding things as to this individual. How did he begin to apart from the responsibility, personally, what was happening to him? What was beginning to motivate him apart from the family because you still have this little thing that is tapping away inside of you that you want to get closer to cancer and you want to get into that place. So how was this young man with this tap that is going on a daily basis? As you mentioned, you're working in other places and all you're thinking about constantly is this thing, that tap that is going on with there. How did it begin to affect you and how did you respond to that affecting of you?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll take your question just a little slightly different. So, I wind up working at Grant Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, with a cancer researcher. We had a new drug that was an investigational drug that he would use frequently on patients that could receive no more chemo in their life and no more radiation in their life. So they were at the end of sort of their treatment cycle. Cancer was growing and flourishing in them, pretty readily, a lot of these patients, and a lot of them had lung cancer. Some of them would have, brain cancer or, just, sort of the worst of the worst in terms of cancer patients. And this is where I had said to you that, I figured out that I couldn't be that close to patients because, I mean, you would just routinely see people. And I mean, there were a lot of people that we would see that wouldn't pass away in the operating theater where we were. They, they would pass away at home or, in between treatments and things like that. And so all of a sudden we would get a notification that so-and-so had passed away. And it was sad to hear that, that had happened, that they had succumbed to cancer. But at the same time, it was like, well, hopefully this, therapy would continue on. And, we've got something here that, does seem to help people. It doesn't necessarily get rid of the cancer, but it would help, intermittently. There's one particular patient that we were getting ready to go on vacation. And my family and I, so we were getting ready to go to Tennessee, which is where my wife's parents had moved after we were out of high school. They had moved to Tennessee, and we were getting ready to go see them on vacation. My wife was waiting for me outside of the hospital in the little circle drive in the front, and but I was in the operating room theater. We were there was one particular patient that we'd seen several times. I had interacted with him, a lot while he was waiting for treatments and things like that, and actually grown a relationship with this individual. And he had lung cancer, and the doctor went up to him prior to the treatment, and he put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, "It's okay. Everything's going to be okay." We went into the operating room. This patient was he had lung cancer, and he was sitting up in his bed, and they laid him back. And from the moment that they laid him back, he started bleeding so severely, just from laying him down, that we couldn't recover him from that point in time. I mean, they had tried everything to get him oxygen, to pull out the blood, to do everything that they possibly could to recover him. We had done CPR for hours. I mean, it felt like, anyway, I couldn't really tell you the exact amount of time. But that moment in time, I came back from vacation and essentially said, I just can't do this. I can't be this close. So
it is.
So that point in time to me was, yes, I want to be in healthcare. No, I don't necessarily want to be this close. I found another job in Charlotte, North Carolina, worked in a similar sort of fashion, but not nearly as close to patients at that point in time. And then thereafter, started plotting this path towards working in healthcare with manufacturers like General Electric and Becton Dickinson and things like that. So, that's just to try and cut to the chase a little bit. That's kind of the path that I wound up on.
Yeah, and that again, another moment where you make that information. Again, I keep telling people, life is just a series of small decisions, statement of faith. And again, I say that because the individual believes it more than anyone else on this planet, because then it governs them. It governs their behavior. I was in, my story was I was in healthcare. I was in the management side of it. And I was one of those guys that was writing policies and procedures and getting, helping HMOs to get their accreditation. So I was nowhere near the day-to-day trauma that everyone was looking into. And then my sister made a statement to me. She said, "You would be great in the assisted living facility place to manage one of them because of your skill and upkeep." And I told her, I said, "You know what? I'll go in as a marketer just to, get my feet wet in there." And she said, "You." She kept warning me about it. She said, "You don't want to go that close." And I said, "All right." So I got in there, and I was every morning I would meet my all the residents there because I wanted to get to know them because I brought some of them in, their families and so forth. So every morning my round was to go and meet everyone and say hi and talk to them. And there was this one lady that every time I go in there, she would call me chocolate. And if she was younger, she would be eating this chocolate and all that stuff. And she would be flirting with me. She was about 90 years old. I love her. And every morning we would go and have our little chat talk. And one morning I got there and we sat down and she didn't look too well. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I feel a little sluggish, but I'm okay." And we chatted for a little while and I got up and I said, "Are you sure? Because I can have someone come to you." She said, "No, I'm okay." And I continued to do my rounds. And when I finished, I came back into my office, sat down and was dealing with my assistant on something. And my one of the managers came by and said, "Oh, Mrs. Smith died." And I'm like, "No, she didn't. I just came from there." And she's like, "No, she just passed." And I remember, Doc, here I was in my suit, sitting at my seat, director of, and broke down, crying in tears, because, 30 minutes ago or so, I was having a conversation.
Right.
And when that happened, it shifted my entire being as to the purpose of being in that position and being in that scene, if that theater, as you said. I realized that it was a bridge by which everyone that is working had the honor and the opportunity to be there and to entertain and to talk and to share with everyone while they are at this bridge, because that bridge is a temporary situation, and it changed my life, man. It made me a better man. It made me a more sensitive man. It made me a more patient man. Like, the list can go on and on, but I had to withdraw myself from there to see that drama and trauma all day long. The people that there should be something for them because they're so special. It is beyond what we can even think and say. So here you are, Doc, you're moving through. How did you navigate to the book Overcommitted? How did you become overcommitted? Because that is something that we pick up from our childhood. Some people label it people pleasers and stuff like that. And we haven't learned how to develop boundaries. That was one of mine. I had to learn how to say no, and I didn't know how to do it because I would always try to, they'll drop it on me. "Yeah, I'll do it. Oh, yeah, I'll do that." I'm always trying to go to help. And I became one of the subjects in your book, Overcommitted. How did you gravitate to that? And what was the nexus that caused you to say, "Hey, let me put it in a format of a book"?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the spark first that caused the me to think about the book. So it's interesting, you go through life and you watch your children grow up and eventually I'm watching my daughter in the midst of COVID, as well as the people that I work with in a consulting basis, and I just watched the level of scrambling that because of COVID, that people were doing. I mean, there was an amazing amount of shift that happens in our life because of what happened with COVID. People being sent home to work, kids being sent home to go to school, et cetera, et cetera. And so my daughter at one point in time actually winds up in this situation where she has school herself. She's in the Marine Corps, and so she has a lot of responsibility for the Marines that she works with on a daily basis as well. In addition to that, she has 3 of my grandkids are with her, and so she's trying to balance family life and things like that. And eventually, she called home and said, hey, Mom, can and I talk about this story actually in the book. Hey, Mom, can you come help me out, because I'm trying to figure out how to balance this thing. Yeah. And it just brought me back to think about my own life similarly. Whenever they were all little, oftentimes I at least worked a multi-state job most of their life. And then at different points in time, I had different responsibilities where I had global jobs as well. And so we'd be flying around the world and things like that. And the key spark for me for the book was this idea that, I was overcommitted through all of that. And I talk about this as well in the book. So I have a family, global job, and I was teaching, I think, for 2 or 3 different places at different times. Wow. At the same point. Luckily 2 of them were remote, and so so because there was remote education, essentially I could get on an airplane, fly to another country, check in on my class, make sure that things are going well, grade student papers on airplanes or in the airport or whatever. But yeah, there was all this juggling that was going on. And the key thing that I talk about with regards to overcommitment. So there's 2 aspects to it in my mind. One is having these things that you're overscheduled for. So, you booked yourself twice, repeatedly, and you see it, even today with people, they go to their Outlook calendar, their Google calendar, and they're double booked for things over and over again. Key question there for me is, okay, so of all of the things that you're double booked for, are there things that in your life that you would say are most important versus the things that are least important? And those things that are least important, how do you get those out of your calendar is the key question that I, sort of set out early in the book. Is one, create categories in your life for what are those things that are important. For me, it's family and my personal life. It's my professional life. I definitely would say it's still that. My financial life. And then lastly, my physical fitness life as well, because I'd like to continue to live. And my family doesn't have a lot of longevity other than my father living to be 90. So with all of that, that's kind of how I rank my life. And then as well, set a focus that guides you towards those categories in your life is kind of where I start off early on in the book.
Yeah, you guys that are listening to us, and the title, I love the title because it says so much. All of us know what it means because we are on this overcommitted lifestyle that we have. You name it, the majority of people are on a overcommitted lifestyle. We live that way. And so Doc has put some tools together by which we can investigate the reasons behind that overcommitted behavior that you and I are showing and living every day. And so I want you guys to grab a copy of his books, give it to people, give it as presents and stuff like that, because trust me, all of us are overcommitted. Give it to a mom and a dad. They know what they're talking about, especially that poor mother. But even the students, Doc mentioned his daughter, all of those folks. We are in a society where we find ourselves overcommitted based on work, societal pressures, and all the other pressures. And you know how I feel about a book when you sit down and read a book, is that you're having a one-on-one conversation with that author. You're able to extract information, that the words that are there on the pages are alive. They have his wisdom, his energy. And if you listen carefully, it will guide you. It will cause you to make that statement of faith that will move you forward and guide you for who knows how long, and to move you to that next space. Doc, I want to thank you for coming talk to them about other things. I know you have a few other things. I want you to talk to them as to your class and what purpose of that, how it came about, and what is the vision when someone is in that class.
Yeah. So, so maybe just one last thing with regards to the book that I would mention as well is that there are free resources that come with the book as well, and there's a short 5-day cleanse that you could take as well. It gets rid of the overcommitment in your life. Essentially, you could find out more about that at drdavisphd.com. So that's essentially, where the book will lead you to, essentially, so if you buy a copy of the book, then there's a link in there, which is, overcommittedbook.com, which takes you back to my website as well. And so, I mean, that's essentially what that does. And in the 5-day cleanse, we walk through what I call the overcommitment dare, which is, how to redelegate, things in your life, how to automate different things in your life, how to reschedule the things that are in your life. And then lastly, you have to think about eliminating some of the things as well. How do you sort of, shift those things or eliminate the things that aren't critical to you? So I definitely really appreciate your time, Ken, and thank you for having me on the Threads of Enlightenment. Thanks for having me here.
Man, it's been a pleasure. This conversation has been sweet. I love, and my audience hear me say it all over and over again about this statement of faith, how it is very important that an individual discover them because it does guide them, because it gives them purpose. And when you find your purpose, it makes you purposeful. And so that is designed to make you aware of it. And then once you're ready, Doc, and I tell them you have to be ready for that statement because it will cause you to put a plan in place and it'll put you busy, keep you moving because you have made it, you believe it. And because you believe it, you will want to make it happen and you will do the necessary work that is entailed. And I keep telling, if you don't want personal growth, stay away from it. It's not for lazy people at all. This is hard work, man. But thank you so much, Doc. It's been a pleasure. And I am so excited about this. I know a couple of people that can use that. And I will also give them away as present. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
You too, sir.